Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, greetings, friends, and welcome to this February 24, 2014 edition of Nightcast. And just before the program, our buttons weren't working. They're working now. Thank you, thank you, thank you. In the news tonight, friends, we've got a lot of stories for you, including we'll be hearing a story about the last Holocaust survivor who died today. We'll also be hearing about the explosion of the Minneapolis Metrodome coming up later in the program. But first, we've got the big news from overseas related to Ukraine. An arrest warrant has been issued for fugitive former president, or let's just say fugitive Viktor Yanukovych, just hours ago, earlier today.
Mourning their heroes. In Kiev, the city centre fell largely silent this morning, just the sound of crying and shuffling of feet as people quietly paid their respects to the dead. Independence Square was a protest camp, then a battle zone, and is now a shrine to those who lost their lives. People here blame ousted President Viktor Yanukovych. A warrant has been issued for his arrest. He is now Ukraine's most wanted man.
He should be captured as soon as possible and he should be put on trial. I think he should be brought to Maidan so the people would look into his eyes and would say what do they think about him.
I think he should be arrested, although there are a lot of people whose views are much more radical. It's like they think that perhaps the death, the capital punishment should be implemented in Ukraine again.
The big question is, where is ousted President Yanukovych? He's certainly not here at the presidential palace. It's being guarded by these protesters. They believe he's gone into hiding, possibly in the Russian-speaking south or east of the country. Perhaps he is here in Crimea, where there is still support for the man they insist is their democratically elected leader. People are demonstrating against what they view as a coup. They want to maintain close ties with Russia, which this region was part of until 1954. A new interim president has been installed. He's pro-Western and pro-EU, but says he also wants to have good relations with Russia. Some are worried the tensions within this country could see it split between East and West.
Our priority is to return to the European integration course, where the fight for Maidan began. We have to return to the family of European countries, and to understand the importance of relations with the Russian Federation.
Reconciling Ukraine's past with its future will be difficult. In Kiev, a woman blocks a man from defacing a monument to the KGB, the Soviet Russian security service. Stability here is far from certain, as is the unity of the country.
Hey friends, I just got an alert message, and I can hardly wait to get the details on this story about Israeli jets striking East Lebanon. I'll have some details on that just shortly. Just stand by. Let's stay with the Ukraine story for just a moment. The Russian Prime Minister Medvedev is calling the upheaval armed mutiny.
Strictly speaking, there is no one to talk there. The government doesn't exist. There are big doubts about the legitimacy of a whole series of organs of power that are now functioning there. Some of our foreign partners, our Western partners, think differently, that those are legitimate bodies. I don't know what constitution and what laws they've been reading. It seems to me it's an aberration to call legitimate what is essentially the result of an armed mutiny.
Okay, sorry for the delay, friends. I had my nose in that Israeli story. We'll have news on that for you in just a few moments. Yeah. Well, Israel's not acknowledging it, but we'll have some information, as I said, just a moment on it. What I want to show you next is something that I got on Twitter. Twitter. You know, you call these tweets, but it's on Twitter. And, tweet. This one. Let's see. This one from a press release from the Federal Foreign Minister Steinmeier's office. I hope he's honored. I named my new horse Frank Walter Steinmeier after the Foreign Minister of Germany. I really only did that just to remember his name. I think he's going to have some significance in the future. I don't know, but someone to watch. In this press release out of his office, he tweeted this on Twitter about the agreement. Now, this was from Friday. This was the agreement that was supposedly signed on Friday. Agreement on the solution of the crisis in Ukraine, as German Representative Federal Foreign Minister Steinmeier has just signed the agreement in Kyiv. Now, this was Friday, a late Friday night, in fact, just this past Friday. On this behalf, the Foreign Minister of Germany, France, and Poland made the following statement. The Foreign Minister of France, Germany, and Poland welcome the signing of the agreement on the settlement of the crisis in Ukraine. Commend the parties for their courage and commitment to the agreement and call for an immediate end to all violence and confrontation in Ukraine. Now, friends, this is not what happened on Saturday in the parliament in Ukraine. This was an agreement that was signed Friday night, and it's the one when you heard in yesterday's news, you heard the rejected president saying that he was going to depend on these other people that signed this agreement with him. This is the agreement the president was talking about. Germany signed it, France signed it, Poland signed it Friday night. But then Parliament, they pulled a little twist on Saturday. But I'm gonna let's bring up the first page. It's a 2-page agreement, and the third page just contains the signatures. And let's just whip through the agreement because I'd like you to see this. I think this will be helpful to you in this crisis. This crisis could have some tremendous impact on the way the EU shapes up and the relations between Russia and the EU and the United States. How it's all going to shake out. Now, I know this is not very clear because not clear at all. I can't even read it on this screen. Let's go to the next page, 2. But here's the main thing. Page 3, we can at least make this much out on page 3. It was signed by the President of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. It was signed by 3 other parties for the opposition and witnessed by, witnessed by Poland and Germany and France for the EU. And somehow, all right, but now you heard Russia. You heard Russia's take on this, and Russia's not acknowledging what happened in Parliament as a legitimate thing at all. And the Foreign Minister of Germany and the UK has been in touch with Russia, especially the Prime Minister of Britain they've been in communications with Russia. So right now this thing is moving around, something to really be keeping our eye on. But again, the Russian Prime Minister called it an armed mutiny. He was speaking after Ukraine's interim interior minister. This is another story about to come up. Let me change this for the Russian Prime Minister was speaking after Ukraine's interim interior minister said an arrest warrant had been issued for fugitive ousted President Viktor Yanukovych. Now, in our next story, there are fears of a financial collapse in Ukraine.
Moscow told Kiev that all these privileges are pretty much off the table, and Ukraine has to look westwards towards EU and potentially IMF to find external sources of financing, because they are in desperate need to bring in international reserves. They have been running out of these international reserves for some time. According to various estimates, they have less than 2 months import coverage, and they have around $9 billion debt to service in 2014, and most of it in the first half of 2014. So it doesn't look good for Ukraine unless they manage to get that foreign currency as soon as possible.
If money is provided from the IMF or the EU, it's not going to come free, it's not going to come cheap, they're going to expect reforms.
Well, exactly. IMF has been refusing to be that shining armored knight. They have been saying that Ukraine has to prove that they will finally embark on the reform path. They will cut their public spending bill, that gas prices will be liberalized. Of course, the circumstances have changed. There's not even a fully formed government. It's still but the political turmoil still continues, which makes it even more difficult for donors like IMF to extend those loans. But if they do, most likely there will be these conditions, because frankly I think the IMF and also EU are a bit tired that consecutive governments in Ukraine have not delivered on the promise of reform.
What does the Ukraine have in terms to drive its economy?
Well, it's rich in resources and, of course, human capital. The country has 46 million strong population, highly educated. Ukraine benefited during the Soviet Union from developing its industries such as the metal industry, or also part of high-tech. Defense industry is quite important, chemicals, not to mention agriculture. So there's a lot of potential. Ukraine has been suffering from poor economic management. It's the mismanagement that didn't create the business environment that would have attracted the foreign investment, private investment. So it's almost waiting to be unlocked.
Friends, that was senior economist from IHS Global Insight, Lilit Gevorgian, who told the BBC World that the Ukraine was in desperate need of financing. It doesn't look good for Ukraine unless they manage to get that foreign currency as soon as possible, is the bottom line of what she said. Friends, we will take a look in just at the well, maybe this is a good moment to do that now, just to take a look at what information I have on the Israeli jets striking East Lebanon. Israeli jets have carried out airstrikes in eastern Lebanon near the border with Syria. Lebanon state news agency says Israel's military has not commented, although an Israeli security source quoted by Reuters said there had been Air Force activity in the north. Lebanon's national news agency said the air raids took place near the village of Nabi Sheet in the Bekaa Valley. The Lebanese militant Hezbollah group has a strong presence in the valley. Correspondents say Lebanon's eastern border is frequently used by smugglers, and Israeli planes have targeted the area several times in the past 2 years. Security sources say the targets may have been trucks of weapons from Syria destined for Hezbollah. And that's what we have on that story out of the Middle East on Israeli jets striking East Lebanon. Now, in our next story, protesters seize the ex-president's son's luxury cars.
Це до речі, непогані варіанти для гонок по місту, по Києву. Ми будемо намагатися розібратися, що це за машини, хто їх.
We're going to have to figure out what these cars are and who they belong to, and what we will do with them. We'll have to look for people to help us determine all that, and I do not rule out the possibility that this is the property of one of Yanukovych's sons.
Одного з синів Януковича.
Friends, I thought there might be more commentary with this. I'll just tell you a little bit I know. The 12 vehicles were apparently discovered on Friday at a private warehouse near Gostomel, near Kiev. One of them, an armored Knight 15 luxury SUV, is reported to be worth about 4.5 million pieces of the Ukrainian money. That's about $500,000 in American dollars, or 300,000 pounds, British pound sterlings. On Saturday, protesters were able to walk unchallenged into Mr. Yanukovych's luxury home. We showed you video of that last night. His home, which is just north of Kiev, they were able to do that after police abandoned their post. Now from Egypt, the interim government of Egypt resigns unexpectedly.
Prime Minister Hazem al-Biblawi, he didn't state out why he resigned or he decided to leave. He didn't state out a clear reason what pushed his government to make such a decision at a very critical time when the country is expecting presidential elections in a couple of months. But in fact, his government has been severely criticized during the past weeks as being weak and incompetent. We have lots of strikes, not only in Cairo, but all over the country. You have strikes in the sector of transportation, in the sector of textiles. So perhaps this is, in a way or another, pushed the government to submit its resignation right now. Actually, what the Prime Minister said, that they came to power at a very critical time and that they managed to get Egypt out of the dark tunnel. That's what he said. And that he feels like leaving his post now after the completion of the first phase of the roadmap.
Okay, and friends, we've got some news that for some of us, this is going to be some really good news. The Ugandan president approves the anti-gay law.
As soon as the president finally puts pen to paper, as some people would say, there was a cheer in the room. You had officials, you had top ministers present, and they were extremely happy. And this is a bill that's been popular amongst many Ugandans. If you look at the religious groups, his ruling party, and then many citizens, they're quite happy that the president is defending what they say are traditional African values.
No death penalty, which I suppose some would see as a very small concession. But Mr. Museveni himself, does he stand foursquare behind this? Is he a supporter of these sorts of draconian measures, really?
Well, he says when you look at issues like promoting homosexuality, he was on the side of the MPs who passed the law. However, what he says he wanted to do was to find out whether gay people are born gay or are nurtured gay. And he called for several scientific reports from scientists here in Uganda and the United States. He says that there was no scientist that stood up to say that there was actually a genetic reason, one gene that caused somebody to be a homosexual. However, the scientists here in Uganda did say that there were several genes, biological reasons as to why somebody could be gay. And he says because there was no specific gene that was pointed out to him, he then had to sign the bill into law.
Okay, well, it would be actually much more merciful to just put them to death. Those of you who understand God and God's way, they will be resurrected at a time when our adversary, our great enemy, Satan the devil, will not be around, influencing and encouraging such perversion, which it is, sick perversion. But at least the country passed a law to lock them up. They're going to have to spend tax money feeding them for the rest of their lives. Been a lot better for everybody if they just kill them. and wipe the perversion off the face of the earth, along with all the disease that it creates, which people think they can use medicines to overcome. You know, the real way around, let me grab a book I have up here in front of me, the real way around getting all these horrible diseases is as reported in this little book we had to study our first year in college at Ambassador College, a book by S.I. Macmillan, medical doctor, called None of These Diseases. And in this book, a famous doctor shows that healing answers to most of our devastating diseases are contained in sacred writings 40 centuries old. In other words, he's talking about the answers to our most devastating diseases are contained in the Bible. How to avoid those diseases and have none of those diseases by living God's way. That's the way to do it. Now, our next story from London, England, the oldest known survivor of the Nazi Holocaust, Alice Herz-Sommer, has died in London at the age of 110 years old.
This is Bach.
Until her final days, Alice Herz-Sommer's passion for music never waned. A documentary tracing her incredible life story has been nominated for an award at next month's Oscars.
My world is music. I am not interested in anything else.
Born into a Jewish family in Prague in 1903, she spent 2 years in a Nazi concentration camp at Theresienstadt, where she was allowed to continue playing her beloved piano. Though she survived, she suffered terrible losses. Her elderly mother was killed in Treblinka, and her husband died in Dachau. She said music kept her alive, and the optimism which sustained her through the Holocaust never left her.
Every day in life is beautiful. Every day. It's beautiful.
Okay, there she is, Alice Herz-Sommer. And friends, like I mentioned last night, there's been a lot of stories in the news lately about Nazis, just one story after another, kind of bringing back to memory those of us who are wise to look to the lessons of history, that there was a Nazi presence and influence, and just because it's not in power at the moment, that doesn't mean it's not there underground waiting to spring forward at the right moment. You know, let's take a look at our chart before we go to our next story. Just to remind us of something, the first 4 seals of the book of Revelation, which are depicted as horses of different colors, a white horse of religious deception, a red horse of war, rumors of war, and world war. Oh, and I see we had our microphone level a little bit off. Sorry about that. And world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. And then the 3rd seal, the black horse of famine, and the 4th seal, the pale horse of disease, epidemic, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. Also, Jesus Christ said in plain language, this horse, whose rider is named Death, alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave, would be the characteristics or activities of seismic activity, commotions in the air, such as gale force winds of all kinds, and commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, wildfires, floods, etc. And also, the 3rd thing Christ described in plain language, in the language of the day, the Greek language, he used the term tarake or tarake, meaning trouble, troubled waters, both literally and figuratively, mob seditions in the figurative sense, but not the trouble, not the major trouble that is depicted by the next seal, the next event, the next major event in prophecy to happen is the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, the time of World War III, the time of a great martyrdom that will make Fox's Book of Martyrs look like just an introduction to an encyclopedia. And it'll be the time when the old Holy Roman Empire is revived, and 10 nations, 5 from the east, 5 from the west, as the Bible depicts them as 5 of miry clay and 5 of iron, meaning they will not get along, but because of the world crisis, they, just like Ukraine is torn between Russia on the east and EU on the west side of it. And it's a torn nation about to be split in two. But something will make the east and the west come together at least long enough to coronate a new emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, which the Bible calls a beast, which will be ridden by the Roman Catholic Church and its Pope. Maybe this current one, maybe yet a new one, maybe the revival of an old one we once had sitting in the lurks of the Vatican. Who knows how the God of this world is going to work that out, and how God is going to allow the God of this world to work that out, with the God of heaven having the overall power over the whole thing as to how it all plays out and of course it will play out according to His Word. Friends, last night we showed you the arrest of the Mexican drug baron Shorty Guzman. Tonight we've got a video showing you his tunnel network. Oh, and apparently we only have video. Following the arrest on Saturday of Mexico's most wanted man, Joaquin Shorty Guzman, the Mexican Attorney General's office has released video footage of tunnels used by the drug baron to avoid capture. Guzman, the leader of the Sinaloa drugs cartel, was finally apprehended in Mexico after 13 years on the run. And there's the video of his little tunnel network back there. Friends, I mentioned earlier we'd show you the demolition, the explosion. It's actually a demolition of the Metrodome Stadium in Minneapolis as it was blown up this morning. The concrete ring beam was brought down by controlled explosive charges. Did I say this morning? That was actually yesterday on Sunday. The demolition will make way for a new 65,000-seat state-of-the-art stadium for the Minnesota Vikings, which is an American football team. The Metrodome was voted the worst stadium in the U.S. by Time magazine in 2012, and therefore, as you can see, there it goes, the blowing up and demolition yesterday of the world's worst stadium in the U.S., according to Time magazine. Well, friends, that's all the time we have for tonight. Thanks for joining us on this Monday night edition of Nightcast. God willing, and the streets don't freeze over or the creeks don't rise, we'll be back again tomorrow night, Tuesday evening, with tomorrow's edition of the current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying, good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.